Thank you, folks, as the credits roll. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the filmmaker, Ran Tal. Ran, please join us. He's the director of Children of the Sun, for those of you who have seen that, about the kibbutz, children who were born in the kibbutz. Garden of Eden, about the Sachna that we showed here at Other Israel one year. The museum, which was, I think, your last film that we showed here, about the Israel Museum. If you haven't seen all of Ran Tal's films, they're as fascinating as this one. And please welcome Jacob Kornbluh. Jacob, where did you go? Jacob, thank you. Senior political reporter for The Forward, to lead this conversation. Thank you so much for an amazing film about an amazing character, and I hand things over to you, Jacob.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't see you all, so I'm going to assume that you can see me. Ron has, Isaac has already introduced him. First of all, thank you for the JCC, for the sponsors, and for all you for coming out and watching this. Before I go into details, Ron, about some of the key moments in this film, can you just elaborate at why you picked Ehud Barak, the figure Ehud Barak, who is a great storyteller, to tell this story and what impact this had on your way of sort of describing this in a historical lens?
I'm trying to remember why. I think I felt for a long time that I'm not so much understand the world that I'm living in. I'm not in sync with reality. And then by a chance, I read Berlin, Ishaya or Isaiah Berlin, small book. I think it's called the Fox and the Hedgehog from the 50s. And he actually, in these very small and brilliant books, tried to analyze Tolstoy, War and Peace, that came out in the 1868, I think, when Tolstoy actually speak about the war between Russia and France, 1812. And I find it very amazing for me to think about all these questions and how it's going back in generation with no answers, especially what Tolstoy actually speak in War and Peace about the responsibility of leader to history, who create history, what is history, how we tell ourselves the story and why we tell this story and not this story about the events that's happened. And then I felt, if I could ask those questions, old questions, through Barak biography and through the Israeli historical chronic, maybe I can bring back this, classic question that it's interesting for me to deal with. Of course, there is no answer, but I think it was to think about it. And I felt that Barak is the ultimate Israeli statesman that can speak about the event that he was a witness, like a small player in this huge play of Israel as a kid in 48, witnessing the Nakba, and go all the way to play the major role of the play when he was prime minister in 2000 and try to influence reality and failed, like you see in the film. And I felt that he can go very deep to the event, to the intimate moment where he was, was there. And then I hope he could do the zoom out and try to speak about history in general. So that's why I go to him and challenge him with this idea. As lucky me, he accepted that. Yeah.
So if you can just share, like, you approach him and you tell him you have this idea, how about you tell your story, your side of the story? Was it challenging for him? Were there any parts that you didn't include in this film that may have set some other side of the story?
Um, I think it was interesting offer for him because usually he deal with all the Israeli politics gossips and stuff like that. Um, and as you see in the film, he's a kind of very educated kind of person. And I think it was interesting to him to do that. At those time, he was in the state and wrote his biography. This came out in English, and I saw that he's retired and he's just tried to summarize his life and so on. I didn't realize that he will become opposition to Netanyahu and try to go back to Israeli politics and failed again. Um, um, but it was. I think it was an interesting offer, and it was in the right time. And he actually came and sit down for 3 days, and 1 year later, another days. Like I had like 20 hours, Barak speaking to the camera, and then another 18 months to try to figure out what to do with all these hours of speaking and speaking and speaking.
Um, is there anything that you can tell us that is not included in the film that he has told you?
Yeah, there is many stuff, but not. I don't think anything is like a huge story or scoop. I think anyone here that's know the history of Israel know all the details here. It just I try to put it in a different frame. So there's a lot out there, but I felt this is what interesting for me. And this is dealing all the time around the big questions. What if? That's I put in the title of the film. Um, and no, sorry, no big story behind the scene.
I got to try, right?
Yeah, you had to.
You start, with him looking into the camera and telling his story. When he ends um, this film, right? Uh, is it something in his personality that you felt that took him through those moments that you describe in the film, all these key moments in the life of Israel, that was courageous, determined? Uh,
For him side or for my side? I think for me it was interesting decision, to put all the 85 minutes that you just watch on the shoulder of one person, because usually this kind of film is like a Rashomon. You tell that, everybody tell different angle of the story, and I felt that I want to see history through the eyes of one of the most, I don't know, typical Israeli, the elite of the elite, grow up in a kibbutz, being the commando, then the chief of staff, and then go to politics, and made it all the way to prime minister. So I felt that if we actually see everything through his eyes, and I can have this dialogue with the materials, with archive, with him, I think it's of course it's one angle of the story, but I think it's important one, and any one of the audience can agree or disagree, but can maybe understand something about the way the Israeli mind that Barak represent is working. So I felt that I had a gamble because I didn't know if he can handle 85 minutes by himself, but I think he made it, at least from my point of view. Yeah.
in your understanding, do events make a leader, or is it the leader who creates those moments in history where he's able to make history change the world?
I don't know. I think it's like I said in the beginning, it's a classical question with no answer because, as Barak said also in the film, we don't know about the road not taking. We only know our existence, and we don't know what could happen if, because any door lead to another door, and it's a million of options. But at least I think it was to think about it in order to understand our present and maybe to think about the future. That's why I try to focus on some key moments that's leading all the way to this decision about dividing Jerusalem, and to see how this old mythological story, all these myths, stronger than any of any people that try to deal with this kind of conflicts in a reasonable way. And in the end, the big myths, the big ideological ideas that came to life thousands of years in the past are still running our existence in much more ways than we admit. And everything felt about this, I don't know how many acres in Jerusalem that nobody know how to deal with because it's so mythological and holy and nobody can give up about it and then the war continue.
There's one episode that I didn't see in this film, which was Ehud Barak's return to politics in 2009, where he served for 4 years under Prime Minister Netanyahu. But they had sort of that alliance. There was this tough decision. I think it came up 2 times in 2010 and closer to 2012 about striking the Iranian nuclear facilities. Why is that not part of his story?
I felt two reasons. First of all, it's a story, have some kind of narrative, and it was interesting for me to go all the way when he was very close to change the history of the state of Israel, and it doesn't work, it's failed. And I felt it's kind of tragic ending, and I didn't want to go to the next big decision about nuclear, to attack the nuclear Iranian weapons, and and I had one decision that's failed, like make peace. I didn't want another decision that didn't came out. But those of you who know history, of course, Barak was pro attacking Iran, and history will tell if he was right or wrong. Yeah.
So the title, What If? You asked him, you seem to ask him that question in a different sense. You asked him, do you think the failure of Camp David and the Intifada led to him losing the election? My question is, what if? What if Camp David hadn't failed, or the Intifada didn't follow, or somebody else other than Arik Sharon would run against him and Ehud Barak would win re-election? Would he have another opportunity? Would things be different?
I don't know, Jacob. This is the big questions. You can go back and say, what if about Yom Kippur? What if about 67? This war, the Israel won the big prize and stuck with that until today. And what if 48? What if, I don't know, Herzl in the 19th century? And what if and what if? And it's never-ending question. We don't have the answers. But at least maybe it's allowed us to analyze um, in a better way what's happened and give us some idea to think about it. But I don't know. And nobody can answer that. We just know what's happened. We don't know what's not happened.
So what we know now is 20 years later, we are in challenging times. Obviously, Lebanon that you showed in that film is unstable. The political process in the humanitarian situation in Gaza could lead to another war. But there are also opportunities, right? The normalization with the Arab world, new administration in Washington, new government in Israel. Do you think this sort of creates
I'm not a
opportunity?
political analyzer, so I don't know if I can answer all this question. I just want us to think about the huge forces of history that most of them we don't see. Sometimes when it's pop up like immigration, like a huge war in the Middle East, all the immigrants came to Europe, changed the politics in Europe. People run away from South America to United States and change the population, everything. The epidemics that make Trump lose the election. There is so much going on that we don't, and we cannot understand that even many years after that. So of course the Middle East is fragile and is in disaster in the last 5 years. It's not new to anyone here. And of course, any disaster comes with opportunity, like happened in '73 with Henry Kissinger. One of the most brilliant statement in the history of the 20th century, at least my opinion. I know it's in the States. People don't forget him about Vietnam, but he did a lot of beside Vietnam, and he saw what's happening in this crisis and take it as an opportunity for making a peace with Israel and Egypt. And of course, it's led to assassination of Sadat and later on Rabin. So that's what Barak said. We live in a world that with so much we don't know. That's it's so difficult to make the right decision when you are a leader in a place so difficult and conflictual like Israel or I don't know this place or other places. It's not New Zealand, yeah. It's that it doesn't matter who is the prime minister. It's to be the prime minister of Israel. It's dealing with history almost every month. Yeah.
So we're going to open this now for questions from the audience. I would ask as a moderator, but also for yourself to get more time with Ran, to limit those to questions, not statements. And if you can do it briefly. So whoever has a question, and we'll get you a microphone. I see somebody there. Oh, you want to ask a question?
Oh. What was Ehud Barak's reaction to watching this?
Yeah, it was very funny because it was take a long time, and I think so much happening between the shooting and the finishing of the film, and then it was also this COVID-19 and all the film festivals shut down, and finally there was a window that we can screen in one of the Israeli festivals, and they really want him to come to the premiere. That's never happened. So I called him to see if he can do it and when it will be convenient for him. And he opened his, calendar, tried to figure out, and then his wife shouting from the back of the apartment, "Hey, Ehud, you never saw the film. Maybe you became an idiot over there." So he said, wow, she's right. I would like to see it before I came, to see it with hundreds of people. And then I went to his apartment and I screened it for him, and it was interesting moment. He stopped in the middle to see one of Netanyahu's speeches, and then he said, and he shut it and continued watching it. But it said something about his character. He forgot the 4 days. He spoke with me, and then, but he thought it's interesting, and his wife told him, "Ehud, it's okay. You become in a different perspective like you usually do, and don't make any comments, and it's ending as a friend." Yeah.
Thank you for the film. In the last few years, Barak veered further to left. He joined Meretz, and he also saw the sort of collapse of his political camp and opposing Netanyahu. It's interesting that Netanyahu is not mentioned in the film. Even though he served with him and all that. So did you at all discuss, did anything come up about, his decision in later life, basically in his 70s to, join Meretz, that I imagine, it's not something he would have done, younger in life?
Yeah, he spoke a lot about that and about the future of Israel and about his relationship with the Netanyahu's family, not just Bibi, also his brother, Yoni. But I felt so much talk about it, and he speak about it a lot. And I really want to take it out of the current events and try to go back to this historical event. We are 20 years after Camp David. Time ran like that. It's all so many people don't. I guess you are. I don't know when you are. Yeah, so I felt that I don't want to deal with the politic right now, and I put it at the side. But he spoke a lot about that and about how he feel about the future and all the risks and maybe opportunity, and somehow he's still optimistic. I'm not sure I understand that, but that's the way he see the situation right now and analyze that.
Do you ever think he would even have a chance to make a deal with Barak? Would have a deal to make a deal with Arafat if, let's say, Rabin never did get assassinated? by an extreme right winger.
Rabin assassination
But
was before Barak was
yeah, but do
prime
you
minister.
think he would have had the deal if that wasn't the case? You think he wouldn't have the deal if it wasn't the case?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
We'll take another question.
Yeah.
What he reveals himself as is a very philosophical person who's experienced such a wide range of successes and failures and ups and downs. But also, it brings to mind the expression that hindsight is brilliant. You know, when you look back, you could think of all the decisions you had made otherwise. But he seems to say that most of the decisions were between two bad things, so that they had to judge which decision would do less damage rather than which decision would be helpful. And he has a kind of a philosophical attitude about it, and I find that quite admirable for somebody who has gone through all that he has. He goes beyond himself and all the terrible things that really happened to something a little more expansive, which
Yeah.
I appreciated.
Thank you. Barak is actually his first degree was in math in the Hebrew University. He studied, and then he went to Stanford for analyzing ניתוח מערכות. I don't know how to say that. So I think if he wasn't go to the army, he was like a scientist. This is his nature in a way. This is the way his mind working more as a scientist than not as a philosopher. Yes, it's sometimes he can surprise you, because he never admits that he makes mistakes, but he can say that if I was Palestinian, I probably go and join one of the PLO organization, and so this is something that no Israeli leader can say beside him, and he can say it also many other things, but this is kind of not politically correct honesty sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful film. Thank you for that.
Thank
Did you get a sense at all from Barak of whether he thought that Camp David was the final opportunity to get a peace deal, that it may have passed forever? Because I know there were some follow-up negotiations in Taba the following year, and then I think also Ehud said that he thought he could strike a deal with Abu Mazen had he not faced impeachment. But for all intents and purposes, do you think Ehud Barak felt that Camp David was the last chance to ever get a true peace deal with the Palestinians?
He never said that, he always tried to see opportunities, but many people think that way. And I definitely felt in 2000 that in urgent way that this is something you need to do. You need to stabilize the relationship between the Israeli and Palestinian, because it's in the end it's destroyed the Palestinian life and destroyed Israel's state and etc. But if you ask him today, okay, it's lost, and many people on the Israeli left felt the feeling that way, he will not agree with that. I don't know if he's right or wrong. Everybody here, I guess, have his own opinion about these very important questions. But Barak, by his nature, always seeking for opportunities.
We're going to take two last questions. We're going to take one over there.
You sort of slightly answered it, but I was wondering, how do you tie in this interview, What If, with the title of this whole project, which is called Other Israel? There is no direct link between the two. So how do you think that your film, which is brilliant, really ties in to the idea of Other Israel?
I think this is the opportunity to thank Carol and Isaac for helping me and bring me here, and I really appreciate that. But I think this is kind of question they need to answer. I just made a film, and I don't responsible.
I'm going to answer it. I'm Carol Zabar.
The truth is, this is not Other Israel, and this is not what we created the film festival for. But in the 15 years we've been doing this, we've enlarged our scope. And certainly this film really fills in a lot of holes in what's happened in Israel and really affects the Palestinian community in Israel as well. I thought it was amazing that he went into his theory of assassination. It was brilliant and courageous. Whoever talks like that? It was really wonderful. So I know I didn't really answer your question, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah, and maybe in the last 5-6 years, when Barak actually, like somebody mentioned here, joined Meretz, the left Zionist party, and became one of the supporter, at least one of the loudest one of all the demonstration in Jerusalem and all over Israel. So it's also interesting the way he made from being in the central of the old Labour Party, Rabin way, and the way he speak right now. But I guess this is not typical Other Israel film, yeah.
We leave room for people also outside of the minorities populations to bring some of the stories and hear some of the voices that we want to hear at Other Israel more, and I think align with a lot of the way we're exploring the history and the reality right now. I want to give a huge thank you to Ran for being here.
Thank you.
Jacob for moderating this conversation.
My pleasure, and thank you all for participating and asking such honest and direct questions.
A beautiful film. Tell your friends. It's also available virtually. And of course, a big thank you to the Forward for their partnership in all of this. Next up at 4:30, we have the screening Blue Box.